Hello there, my name is Jal Patel. I'm the editor of AlevelPolitics.com, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to answer a 30-mark source-based question. These are sources that are part of the Edexcel syllabus, and these are questions that appear in both Component 1 and Component 2 UK and political ideas exams. You only get source questions, of course, for the UK components. So today I'm going to go through, in the most easiest fashion, how to answer those 30-mark source questions that lots of students find very difficult. Now, I'm the editor of AlevelPolitics.com. You can go to my website for examples of essays, but also I run a really popular newsletter. I've got thousands of students who sign up to my regular bulletins. AlevelPolitics.substack.com. You can get that link through my website as well. On the front page of my website, you can just click on subscribe. And in that newsletter, I try to link the week's news to your A-level syllabus. So it's a way to put examples into essays. And I found lots of students find that particularly important when it comes to their final revision. And do subscribe to this channel as well. I'm attempting to put up lots more good content. So I've just started, if you see in my other videos, I've just started a socialism series, but I'm planning to put a lot more content up. Thank you to the 129 subscribers I have so far. I'm very grateful for your subscriptions. Right. Let's then go to the basics. Now, remember, in the exams, for Component 1 and 2, you have to answer one source question out of a choice of two and one non-source question. So you get these two questions, one source, one non-source. Each source question is worth 30 marks and you will have to complete it in 45 minutes. That's the same with a non-source question. And so Section A and Section B, you will be applying a time frame of 45 minutes for both those 30 markers. Now, students often overcomplicate these source answers. The first thing to remember is that you have to answer a source question employing the same structure as a non-source normal standard 30 marker. So generally, the approach to a standard 30 marker is the same as a source question. Whatever approach you employ, now if you want to adopt my approach or your teacher's approach, your approach is going to be identical for both questions. In other words, the essays will structurally look very similar to one another. Now, when you choose a source-based question, you do it on the basis of the question, not the source. And I'm going to show you that on the next slide. So don't read the source first. Ask yourself, can I answer this question without a source? Oh, I should have said at the start, if you want access to these PowerPoints, you can just click on the link in the comments section and it will direct you to my website and you can download today's PowerPoint. So that's all available to you. Also, I should have said, actually, as I go along, I'm going to probably spend less time on how to structure a standard 30 marker, even though I've said a source question is based on the same principles as a non-source question. So if you're interested in working out how to answer a non-source question, please go over to my 30 marker video and it explains how to answer a non-source question. The principles of today will sit on top of the principles that we lay out or I lay out in that non-source 30 mark answer. Right. So let's look at examples of sources. Now I'm just going to move myself at the top there. These are two source questions. Typically you get two paragraphs. Now you don't have to worry about that. So you don't have to worry about where the source comes from. You first have to, and you should look at the source questions first. So you're going to get these two questions and you should ask yourself, well, which one of these can I answer? So here's a question about PR and here's a question about general elections and whether they're stable or predictable. And you should ask yourself the question, well, if it was a non-source question, would I be able to answer it? Or would I be able to answer this one? Choose your sources, not based on the source or the size of the source. Choose your source based on the question. So always look at the question first and ask yourself, can I answer the question? As I said, you're only concerned with what is within the box. You don't have to worry about what is either side of the box. You don't have to worry about that. And I must say, Edexcel overcomplicate it when they talk about how you must respond to the question. I wouldn't worry about that because it's quite misleading, this explanation, I feel. But anyway, as I said, just focus on the question. When you know that's your question, then you need to read the source, but you need to read it line by line. Okay. Right, so I'm not going to focus on this slide. It goes through the assessment objectives. As I said, in my 30-mark video, I go through this slide in a little bit more detail. So I'm not going to repeat that because I think most of you would have come to this after looking at my 30-mark video. Right, so let's talk about the structure of these 30-mark questions. And as I said, the format is the same as a non-source question. So I normally ask my students to divide up their essay into 3 sections. Section 1, Section 2, Section 3. Point 1, Point 2, Point 3, right? Either side of those sections, you've got an introduction and a conclusion. And within those sections, I suggest to students that you should divide it up into 2 paragraphs. So there are 6 paragraphs in the body of the essay, 2 paragraphs here, 2 paragraphs here, and 2 paragraphs here. Now, some teachers suggest that you should write 1 paragraph there, 1 paragraph, so 3 paragraphs. That's perfectly fine. I just find those paragraphs then are very lengthy. I mean, it goes beyond a page when you write on an examiner's script. So I suggest dividing it up into point against, and point against. But it's no big deal. It's just an aesthetic thing, really. I also suggest that there should be an interim judgment at the end of your counterpoints paragraphs. And I think that judgment should really be a sentence or 2 maximum. You don't want to spend too much time on an interim judgment. And I'm going to explain what an interim judgment is a bit later on. Right. So in essence, you've got 3 sections. And in each section, you've got 2 paragraphs. So 6 paragraphs in the main body of the essay. Now, you do not need to have an entirely symmetrical or balanced essay. An essay is an argument with balance, not a balanced piece with some argument. And what I mean by that is your judgment has to be weaved through your essay. The essay is about your opinion. It's about your judgment. And balance, of course, matters. But balance isn't the focus of the essay. If your judgment is missing at the very beginning in your introduction, or if your judgment is not embedded into these paragraphs, then you're going to miss out on a great chunk of AO3. And AO3 is your 10 marks, or are your 10 marks for judgment. So your judgment really is important, and you've got to place your judgment throughout your essay. And I'm going to illustrate that very soon. So how do you put a paragraph together? Well, a typical paragraph, and as I expand on this in my 30-mark video, but a typical paragraph looks something like this. You've got a point, you've got an explanation or an expansion of your point, you've got examples, mostly contemporary, and then you've got analysis of your examples or analysis of your explanations, right? So that's how you typically put a paragraph together: point, explanation, examples, and analysis. That's normally how you write a standard paragraph. You can make a paragraph a little bit more complicated, and I talk about that in my 30-mark video, but let's keep it simple. That's what a paragraph will look like. Well, when it comes to your sources, then you only have to put your source in your opening sentence, in your point sentence. So your point is where you place your source, right? You don't have to quote the source in your explanation. You don't have to quote the source in your examples or in your analysis. You only have to quote the source in your opening point sentence. I hope that's clear. If it's not clear, you can leave a comment in this video at the bottom of the video, and I will answer any of your questions. Now, what I mean by your opening sentence is really your point and your counters. So if you go by my structure, 6 paragraphs in the body of the essay, point against, point against, point against, point counter, point counter, point counter, then your point and your counter is from the source. So in simple terms, you should be directly quoting the source 6 times at the start of your paragraphs. I hope that makes sense. Now, when I say quoting the source, actually quote it. Use speech marks. Don't overquote it. Do make sure you quote the sources so it's very clear to the examiner that you are using the source. That basically means you've got to pair up your paragraphs, right? So in every source, if we were to go back to this source, you will have a point for and a point against. And in fact, this source is really nicely placed because it's formatted with that's all your points for and that's all your points against, right? So what I would do in an exam is I would read it line by line. I would say, okay, here's a point. And then I would annotate that point. I would put a line here and say, this is the point, and just put a sentence explaining what that, not a sentence, a word explaining what that point is. So you may find 3 or 4 or 5 points in this paragraph, and you also may find 3 or 4 or 5 points in this paragraph. You only need 3. And so at the end of the exercise, at the end of reading this, you pick your 3 points for and you pair them up with 3 good points against, right? So as I said, your structure will look like this, and you have to make sure you quote the source in your point and in your counters. Right, so let's interrogate a source. This is a source that I made up. It's a source about conventions of ministerial responsibility. I am updating my A-Level Politics questions resource book. You can find it on Amazon, but you will find a source like this. So I'm putting plenty of sources in there, but also plenty of 30-mark questions. I mean, last year, students really found that invaluable when they revised for their exam. I had actually hundreds of students who purchased my question pack. So I think it's important to go through as many questions as possible when you revise. If you want to know how to revise, by the way, do look at my how to revise videos on my YouTube channel. So I'm not going to read through this entirely, but what I would do is something like this. I would look for my first point. So then I would say, here's my first point and here's my counter, right? So as I read through it, I would say, that's a great point. And then as I read through the counter paragraph, I would say, aha, that pairs up with that, right? So the way it would look in my or on my essay would be something like this. The first reason why it is clear that conventions of ministerial responsibility no longer apply is that Brexit divisions and leaks and the suspension of CCR by Cameron has led to CCR becoming less important, right? So Brexit divisions and leaks, and that is my first point. And CCR was suspended in 1975. So I've also used that to finish my first point. However, these claims may be exaggerated because CCR was suspended in 1975 during the first European referendum. And then I've used that point here. See how I've not overquoted the source. I've just used the source briefly, right? That's all that's necessary. So again, I found another point and a point against here. Also, in the source, it is clear that ministers are today less likely to resign over policy failures. So here we go. And then, however, ministers may resign less over department failures. This is because policymaking is far more complex these days. And here we go. Here's the quote from the counter. So I've just used a for and an against. Some students like to take highlighters into an exam and and you don't over highlight it. I find when students over highlight something, they've just not understood it. Look what we've done. It's a very subtle thing here. You know, it's a work of art, really. What we're doing is we're just finding the points for and the points against, the points for and the points against. And there's an island of text that you're just going to ignore probably when it comes to your essay. Right. And lastly, the PM has been accused of lying and misleading Parliament. He did not resign because the PM has the final decision on IMR. Right, here we go. I've just quoted those 2 points of those two fragments there. However, accusation about the Prime Minister misleading Parliament finally caught up with him, and he was forced to resign by members of his own cabinet. Here we go. This shows that CCR does not work after over 50 ministers resigned from his government. So here we go. We've got points for, points against, and see how we've paired those up. In most, not all, but in most sources, you're going to get a neat paragraph of 4 points and a neat paragraph of against points. There are many more 4 points here and there are many more against points here, but I've just chosen these 3 because I think these are the 3 that I could write more competently about. And I think that's how you should do it, right? Now, you've got to practice sources. So as I said, my booklet of sources are quite important, but do practice plenty of sources. Don't just rely on a few sources you've got from past papers. You've got to practice lots of sources and practice pairing them up. Because I think just reading a source and pairing them up requires a lot of practice. If you've just read, 4 sources before your exam, you haven't given yourself enough time and enough practice before an exam. I give my students tons of sources, and sometimes we don't even answer the whole essay. All we do is I give them the source, and then I give them a few minutes, 5 minutes, and I ask them to just pair up the points for and the points against, right? Because that in itself is a skill you've got to develop. Now, I hope that makes sense. Right. Now, introductions, I go through in my 30-mark video, so do look at that. But as I say very briefly, you've got to have 4 things in your introduction, normally. Definitions, a political context, outline your main points, and give a clear judgment. Now, in this case, your main points are going to be the points from the source. So I think make reference to the source in your introduction, because you're telling the examiner that you're using the source and you've started to use the source from the very beginning. I looked at an examiner's report from a couple of years back, and they quite like that when students use the source from the very beginning. How do you do that? Well, have a look at this. So this is that, so if we go back to the original source I showed you a couple of slides back, this is an introduction that was written by a student of mine. Conventions of ministerial responsibility have been subject to much debate recently as Prime Minister Boris Johnson refused to sack ministers that had broken convention. This is what we call a context, right? These conventions are individual ministerial responsibility, IMR, which lays out the responsibility of ministers to answer for their departments and failures and tell the truth to Parliament. Collective cabinet responsibility is a convention that states the cabinet functions as a team and votes together, right? They are not meant to disagree with government policy once a decision is made. That's quite a lengthy definition, to be honest, but it's a quick definition nevertheless. Now, here's the point I'm making. The source lays out 3 areas that will be explored: how CCR has become less important, how ministers are less likely to resign over failures, and how the PM is the ultimate decision maker, which means that he can break these conventions without consequence, or she can break these conventions without consequence, right? So what I've done there is I've just laid out the 3 points I'm going to use from the source. Of course, by the time you write your introduction, you would have highlighted your 3 points. So your source lays out the 3 areas. So I've told the examiner, look, I'm going to be using the source, right? You're signposting to the examiner that you are serious about the source. And then here's my judgment. It will be argued that these conventions no longer apply. So that's an answer to the original question, whether conventions apply or no longer apply today. I hope that makes sense. So do think about this. You may want to pause the video and just focus on how I've divided up the 4 sections of this introduction. Remember, don't waste your introduction on lots of detailed examples or detailed knowledge. That's not necessary. That can all go into your essay. Right. Now let's say a few words about judgments. I say much more about this in my 30-mark video, but judgments are of 2 kinds. There are embedded judgments or interim judgments, and these all make up your AO3 marks. Here's an embedded judgment. An embedded judgment is a judgment that exists within your paragraph. So as you're writing, you may say it may be argued, but incorrectly, that the Conservative Party has moved away from Thatcherism. However, a stronger argument in the source is that the current Conservative Party only moved away from Thatcherism to an extent. It has become the COVID, because of the COVID pandemic, right? So what you're doing here is you're embedding in your openers, in your point sentence, you're embedding your judgments. Right, you've also got interim judgments, and interim judgments come at the end of your second paragraph, your fourth paragraph, and your sixth paragraph in the body of your essay. So in the paired paragraphs, as I said, you get these interim judgments. And again, I'm not going to focus too much on this because I talk about it much more in my 30-mark video. But it would read something like this. Although there are arguments from the source that the Johnson government has interfered in the economy, a un-Thatcherite approach, their intention is to return to less spending and low tax after the current crisis. So I'm just giving like a quick interim judgment, right? Here the student is coming back to the original judgment, but it was also given the main reason why they have concluded this. So they've given a substantiated judgment. Here we go. Thus, it could be argued that although backbenchers have less power than a government has a majority in recent years, for the reasons mentioned earlier, when the source points out that backbenchers have become more assertive, this is stronger. Thus, the executive is no longer able to dominate the legislature. So again, this is an interim judgment, and it gives the judgment again, but it substantiates the judgment, right? Now, I'm not going to say much more about this because I talk a lot about it in that video. Okay, I'm not going to focus on analysis either in this video. I put it here just because you need to be aware of analysis. But if you want a thorough explanation of analysis, and analysis is really important. Analysis is worth 10 marks. I mean, I tutor students and every one of them actually comes to me saying, I don't know what analysis is. So do look at my video explaining what analysis is in that 30 marker, because I think it's so important. It's worth 10 marks. And again, students lose unnecessary marks because they don't put enough analysis, AO2, into an essay. I've said here analysis is showing significance, causes, consequences, motives, making observations of changes over time, making comparisons between leaders and institutions, or to make links to concepts and ideas. And all of that is explained in my other video. Right. And here we've got using analysis. And again, I'm not going to focus on this because this is really about sources. But these are really good examples of how to use analysis in an essay. And here's how I would illustrate, or a student actually put these analysis points into an essay. And again, you can read this in your own time, but also this is just lifted from the other video. Okay, so let's talk about conclusions. So in a conclusion, you want to restate your judgment, and you want to give the main reason why you have come to the judgment. And if you've got time, give a prediction for the future. Don't just repeat or summarize all of your points. Pick on a single important factor and give a big reason why you came to your judgment. Give a major reason why you came to your judgment. This is what you put into a conclusion. And again, this is lifted from my 30-mark video, but you've got to do that. I should have said, you may want to even just say that, after evaluating the sources, it is clear that conventions on ministerial responsibility no longer apply. So again, you're reiterating to the examiners that you have used the sources, right? So you just want to drop the word sources plenty of times throughout your essay, just to show the examiner that you are interrogating and engaging with the sources. Okay, and this is what a conclusion would look like. A student put this together. To conclude, issues such as Brexit and devolution have shown a change in public opinion as minority parties become more popular. For the Westminster electoral system to remain democratic, it needs to change to represent the views of minority parties. The decrease in popularity of minority parties recently is not a reliable trend, and as constitutional issues such as devolution continue to arise, it is important for minority views to be protected by an electoral system that does not disproportionately overrepresent Labour and the Conservatives. The emergence of multiple parties evidently suggests the Westminster electoral system, first past the post, must change, right? So it's a judgment here at the very end, right? So again, they picked on one of the paragraphs and they've just explained the significant point in those paragraphs and why first past the post needs to change. And as I said, you may want to just drop that you've used the source. So you may want to say, to conclude, after looking at the sources, it is clear that, and then you write your conclusion. Okay. Now here's some really instructive remarks from the examiner's reports. So this is an examiner's report from last year, and the examiner said the source is the key platform in which the response is based. See how they phrase that? A key platform. In other words, your response is all about the source. The points are from the source, in other words, the 3 points for and the 3 points against. It contains competing views which can be justified. The key element is to treat each side with diligence and respect and argue through a range of points pertinent to each. So you've got for and against. To these points, the challenge is to expand on the knowledge and the source that the source contains, then to analyze these points and explain their remit, AO2, then come to a judgment after weighing up the evidence and implications. So here, the source contains, you get your source marks when you quote your AO1 marks partly by quoting the source, right? You don't get your source marks through AO2 or AO3. Because this is AO2 is analysis and AO3 is judgment, and your analysis and judgment comes from yourself, not from the source. The examiner says there's no set format of approaching the source. Okay, I've just suggested one, but there's no set format. That's quite true. There is enough AO1 base to achieve full marks. Newly introduced facts AO1 can gain AO1 credit, but no marks can be advanced for the analysis and evaluation of newly introduced details. Now, this is very confusing. All that means is if you've got a point that's not directly addressed in the source, so remember point for or point against, if your 4 point, so your 3 major points are not directly from the source, you can get additional AO1 marks, but you're not going to get analysis and evaluation marks because you're analyzing and evaluating what is not from the source. So let me give you an example. If a source said, I don't know, is there a democratic deficit? And the source talked about the House of Lords, first past the post, and voter turnout, right? 3 things. But you decided to talk about House of Lords, voter turnout, and the manifesto promises of parties. So you talk about as your 3rd point manifesto promises. That's not acceptable for the examiner because you've taken a point not from the source. You've taken a point from your own knowledge. Now, you may get AO1 marks for that, but you're not going to get AO2 and AO3 because your analysis and your judgment marks in those 2 paragraphs, in those paired paragraphs, have to be interrogating a point from the source. I hope that's clear. So always make sure your 3 points, and if possible, your points against. I should have said it's not compulsory for your counterpoints to be from the source, but it's a good idea for your counterpoints to be from the source. You'll get additional AO1 marks if you do that. But if your counterpoints don't come from the source, you're not going to get capped in any way. It's not like a cliff edge, a problem if you do that. Okay. This is also from the examiner's report. In particular, one very pleasing aspect was the ability of students to bring together competing arguments from the source to create effective comparative analysis in order to build substantiated conclusions. So again, they've used, for and counters. They found that really pleasing. The most effective approach taken was to pair up naturally competing arguments from the source, AO1, as I said, Develop each point with wider knowledge in order to analyze comparatively, fine, the strength and the arguments to lead to substantiated conclusions throughout the essay. Given that the marks are split evenly between the three AOs, then this approach enables students to access the higher mark bands. This approach could be launched in a clear introduction, developed through the body of the essay, and drawn to a clear judgment in the conclusion. In effect, what I've given you today is an interpretation of what the examiners want. I think it's sound. I've passed it by the examiners. My students have now sat a couple of exams and they've got pretty good marks, A and A star marks, in plenty of A and A star marks. And so the source questions, I believe, have been handled appropriately. So I think that's how you answer sources. Okay, I've got this graphic on my website, but you can have a look at it later. This is just a quick summary of how you can write A-star politics essays. Right, I hope you found this useful. Please do remember to subscribe to my Substack and subscribe to this YouTube account. Do put a comment in the comment section if you're confused about source questions, or if you're confused about any of the points that I've raised today. I'm happy to respond. I normally respond within a few hours, so you're welcome to send me your questions. And do go over to my website. There's some really good essays on there. Now, I do hold revision conferences across the country, actually, when we get closer to your exam. The best way to find out about those revision conferences is if you sign up to my Substack, and I normally send out bulletins when I'm ready to do those webinars or those face-to-face revision sessions. Right, I hope you found this useful and I hope it makes a lot of sense. Do go over to my website through the link in the comments to access the PowerPoint slides for today. But for now, goodbye to all of you.